Yesterday, we counted down the very best comic book stories, in my opinion, of 2021. Now it's time to look ahead to 2022. There have already been some major announcements of comic books that are going to be coming out essentially in the first half, most of them in the first quarter. And there are a ton, and I do mean a ton, of comic stories I'm absolutely looking forward to. You know how much I like Way of X? Legion of X isn't even on the list here. It almost made the list, but there are some other titles that I think just edged it out, and I have 10 comic books that I think you and I are going to enjoy in the very first part of 2022. And now let's get to them. At number 10, this comic book normally would be cracking the top 3. Han Solo and Chewbacca, one of the greatest pairings in the history of fiction. The reason it's so low is that Marvel are not exactly knocking it out of the park right now with their Star Wars comic content, in my opinion. But Mark Guggenheim, David Messina are going to be taking over on this series. It's going to take place before Episode 4. It's going to follow Han, Chewie, and Greedo on the job from Jabba, likely explaining how Han got into such terrible debt in a terrible position for Episode 4 in the first place. This is the kind of comic book that hits me right in the feels, that gets me really excited. I'm just apprehensive because it's Marvel and it's Star Wars, and it hasn't been a great pairing so far, but I am absolutely going to be checking out Han and Chewbacca. I really hope they deliver on the promise of what this comic book could be. Coming in at number 9, we're going into the second new series from Jeff Johns' imprint at Image Comics, Mad Ghost, Snipe and Slug. Now, this was supposed to come out in 2021. You can probably see it right on the cover there. But Peter J. Tomasi and Brad Walker, who were doing just impeccable work on Detective Comics before Mariko Tamaki came in, and apparently they lost their gigs. They're moving over to this series. I'll be honest. The idea of a guy shooting a girl in a bullet doesn't exactly appeal to me on the surface level. But when you throw a creator like Peter J. Tomasi on it, you have my attention. You throw an artist like Brad Walker on it with him, and with the work that they've done in the past, you've got my undivided attention. I'm absolutely going to be checking this out, specifically, on the strength of Geiger itself. I imagine they're going to be using the same editorial team. This has an interesting premise. It's not exactly for me, but the creative pairing is so strong, and the debut of Mad Ghost last year was so good that I cannot help but give this at least a try of 3 issues, see if it's for me. I have a feeling, just a feeling, after reading enough Peter J. Tomasi, that I'm going to be singing the praises of Snipe and Slug in 2022. Now it's time to move over to Marvel Comics, and we've got Gambit. I've really been enjoying these throwback miniseries. They're normally 5 issues where you basically go back in continuity 30 years ago, and classic creators are telling these stories. This is going to be Chris Claremont returning to one of the characters he created, Gambit. Obviously on the cover we see Gambit there with young Storm. I love the idea of these series. They're like a break. It's my own little no place where I can go over and I cannot think about all the crap that's going on within the Krakoan era of X-Men right now. Chris Claremont on Gambit sounds wonderful to me. The reason it's this low, and I hate to say this because I do love Chris Claremont, he hasn't exactly been firing on all cylinders. I have to be honest with this. But this is a character he's done great work with in the past, a character that's been misused lately. So I would love to see some great Gambit stories. I do have faith Chris Claremont can deliver the goods, but there is that little seed of doubt in my head that says, you know what, Chris Claremont he hasn't been at the top of his game for a while, but I think he's going to bring the good stuff in Gambit in 2022, and I think this is a series that you and I will be enjoying together and talking about every single time there's an issue released right here on the channel. At number 7, this is the only graphic novel on the list. If you haven't been reading the Reckless universe from Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips at Image Comics, you are missing out. Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips probably are the best creative duo in all of comics right now, and they have been for several years. They pretty much work together exclusively, although Ed Brubaker has had a few other projects without Sean Phillips involved. But all of his best stuff is going to include Sean Phillips. This Reckless series has been fantastic. If you are not completely aware of it, there is a show out there on my friend Ash's channel. It's called the Criminal Cast, I believe it is, with good friends of the channel, Skip and Eric Breen, joining Ash, and they talk about all of the Reckless graphic novels so far. This will be the latest installment coming in 2022. The Ghost in You is absolutely going to be must read. Ed Brubaker, Sean Phillips together, it's like peanut butter and jelly. It's like Mel Gibson and Danny Glover, without all the bad stuff that happened to Mel after, they stopped making Lethal Weapon. They're just a powerhouse duo, and when they get together on a graphic novel like this, they're going to knock it out of the park. At number 6, we have one of the crazy, crossover books that have been announced so far, at least. Godzilla versus Power Rangers, IDW and BOOM teaming up. Yes, please. I love stuff like this when you get two universes that really aren't supposed to be together. How are the creators going to put it together? How are they going to execute it? Is it going to be fun? Because that's what it has to be. If you're going to do a Godzilla Power Rangers, you need to be bringing the fan service and bringing tons of fun. There's good news and there's bad news. The good news is it's going to be illustrated by Freddie Williams II, who did the wonderful Batman TMNT crossovers. He also did the Injustice Masters of the Universe crossover. They're all fantastic. So he's going to be illustrating it. It's going to look like $1 million. The writer is Cullen Bunn. Cullen Bunn has actually been doing some of his best work of his career lately, so I don't want to detract from him, specifically with Shadowman. So there's a good chance that Cullen Bunn has leveled his game up in 2021, and it's leading here into 2022. But Godzilla versus Power Rangers, I wish I knew more about Power Rangers. That's literally my wife's favorite show from when she was a kid, and she's appalled that I've never really watched it. But I will be coming in on this. It just sounds so strange. It sounds so much fun that I have to get in on this. So I will be reading Godzilla versus Power Rangers, and I hope you guys are excited for this as well. Now we're getting into the top 5, and a lot of these are sequels. In fact, now that I look about them, they're all sequels to things that I've loved in the past. So these are things that I've liked that are returning. Most of them are independents. At number 5, we've got the Nottingham sequel from Aftershock. We know that there's going to be a standalone issue on Free Comic Book Day. David Hazan, Andrea Moody did fantastic work on the first volume. If you haven't read the first volume of Nottingham, once the video's over, you need to go to Amazon, you need to go to my comic shop, you need to go to your local comic shop and get you a copy. I think you're going to love it. It's such an interesting take on the classic Robin Hood story. They kind of flip it on its head. The hero is the Sheriff of Nottingham. And spoilers, perhaps the leader of the Merry Men isn't so righteous in this story. I really like the take on it. It's a lot of fun. The art is just kick-ass. That is the best way to describe the art of this. It is absolutely bringing the heat. Andrea Moody does a great job on this one. We know this is just going to be at least a Free Comic Book Day is going to be a one-shot tale about a murder that happens that the sheriff has to investigate. But it does say that this takes place between Volume 1 and Volume 2. I'm expecting Volume 2 in 2022, although they haven't completely announced it yet. Coming in at number 4, Barbaric was in my top 3 comic stories of 2021. We are getting a sequel in 2022 from Vault Comics. Michael Moriarty, Nathan Gooden coming back as well. There's also going to be a Free Comic Book Day of this as well. We don't know a lot of information about the sequel other than that it is coming, and there's going to be, I believe, a couple of one-shots associated with it. When they said, big name comic creators, hopefully it's not, I don't know, Mark Waid, Dan Slott, and who's the other one? Gail Simone. Those are the big announcements last week. Hopefully they go with somebody a little bit more contemporary, a little bit on the top of their game to work in this universe. But really, the pot of gold is Michael Moriarty working on a Barbaric sequel. That first series was so much fun. It's unbelievable when you get in that thing and it's such a weird concept to take a story, hey, we got a barbarian that's going from town to town, and then you throw this wild card of this, possessed axe that gets drunk off of human blood of criminals. And he's got such a weird personality. It's just fantastic. I cannot wait for this sequel. Next up, this is our last Big 2 comic. We've got Batman, Beyond the White Knight. Sean Gordon Murphy returning to the Murphyverse. Sounds like this might be the beginning of something bigger. This is going to be the introduction of Terry McGinnis as Batman Beyond within the Murphyverse itself. Also, judging by the cover, looks like Jason Todd is returning as Red Hood, and we're going to have some other big surprises. Sean Gordon Murphy, at least on the art account associated with it, put out a little teaser of a character. I assumed it was Harley Quinn, but I was wrong, apparently. Maybe it's one of Harley's kids. I'm not really sure. This thing is going to be dope. Sean Gordon Murphy is one of the best artists in all the comic book industry. He has got the pulse of his White Knight universe. He knows exactly the stories he wants to tell. He knows exactly who his Batman is. And there's no one. That's the best part. It's its own little corner of the universe. You know, DC Comics can't screw this up with some line-wide Batman event. DC Comics can't screw this up with a big crisis or something like this. Batman Beyond the White Knight is another one of those no places from the DC Comics universe. You get to go in there. You don't have to worry about all the other crap. And you can just enjoy this wonderful universe that he's building and is expanding volume by volume. Now we're into the top two. You knew these were going to be the two. How was I going to choose between number one and number two? It was very difficult. I'll talk about it here. Coming in at two is the Killock Artisans Wraith from IDW. Livio Rabidelli with the sequel to what I thought was the best? Yeah, the best series last year in 2020. This thing is just fantastic. The art is amazing. Livio Rabidelli he's a connoisseur of robot art. How he emotes robots the way that he does is just fantastic. My one apprehension is at the end of the Killock, it's certainly set up to where you could do a sequel, but it's going to be difficult. But I think he's got the chops to do it. That's the only reason it comes in at number two instead of number one. The art is going to be amazing. I like Livio Rabidelli, one of the real gems that IDW is putting out, one of the real successes that they've had with their creator-owned work. If you haven't read the Killock yet, I suggest you go get that one and get ready for the Killock Artisans Wraith coming up in 2022. This thing is absolutely going to be dynamite. Now it's time to get into my number one most anticipated comic of 2022 that we know of so far. You knew it was coming. We Live, Age of Paladins, Aftershock, Roy and Inaki Miranda, the Miranda brothers returning. We Live was a fantastic comic book. In the very first issue, if you go back and watch my review, I say something at the end of it, and I say, this is what I want out of this comic book story. And guess what they gave me in the very last issue? Exactly what I asked for. With the setup that they had, I said, I know they're not going to do it, but this is what I want. They actually paid it off. Obviously, this is going to be the continuation of that. It's going to be taking place, I believe, 10 years into the future. We're going to see Hototo. It was a full-fledged hero and one of the protectors of this mega city that's going on. Obviously, we're going to have some new villains introduced and some new perils to go through, but We Live is just such a wonderful universe. It's so dangerous, but the children are presented as so innocent, and you're just rooting for them, and you know that the odds are so stacked against them that when they finally win in the end of the first story, that it's just such a welcome relief because they put them through the paces in that one, and it does not feel like things are going to go very well for the children of We Live, and it turns out we are getting this sequel from Aftershock. There's nothing left to say. I couldn't be more smitten with the first story, and I couldn't be more excited to read the sequel. I want to know what you guys are excited for in 2022. What did I miss? Was there something I forgot about? Am I underselling a crossover that's been presented or a sequel out there? Let me know what you guys want to read in 2022. And if you missed my video yesterday, counting down the top 10 stories of 2021, it is right here. If you missed it, definitely check it out. It is a great list. And if you missed any of the comics in this list, you're definitely going to want to read them.